The Ostend Manifesto and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Northerners were already horrified by slavery were roused to fury by two events in 1854. The publication of the so-called Ostend Manifesto and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The document, known as the Ostend Manifesto, was a message sent to the Secretary of State by three American diplomats who were meeting in Ostend, Belgium. President Franklin Pierce, who had taken office in 1853, had been trying to purchase the island of Cuba from Spain, but Spain had refused the offer. The message from the diplomats urged the U.S. government to seize Cuba by force if Spain continued to refuse to sell the island. When the message was leaked to the public, angry Northerners charged that Pierce's administration wanted to buy Cuba in order to add another slave state to the Union. Early that year, Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois introduced a bill in Congress that sparked an uproar. Douglas wanted to get a railroad built to California, but he thought the project was more likely to happen if Congress organized the Great Plains into Nebraska Territory and opened the region to settlers. This territory lay north of the Missouri Compromise, and Douglas's bill said nothing about slavery. But Southerners in Congress agreed to support the bill only if Douglas made a few changes, and those changes had far-reaching consequences. So here's a map of what the U.S. looked like at the time. Douglas's final version of the bill, known as the Kansas-Nebraska Act, was passed in 1854 and created two new territories, Kansas and Nebraska. It also abolished the Missouri Compromise by leaving it up to the settlers themselves to vote on whether to permit slavery in the two territories. Douglas called this policy popular sovereignty, or rule by the people. The Kansas-Nebraska Act hit the North like a thunderbolt. Once again, Northerners were haunted by visions of slavery marching across the plains. Douglas tried to calm their fears by saying that the climates of Kansas and Nebraska were not suited to slave labor, but when Northerners studied maps, they were not so sure. Newspaper editor Horace Greeley charged in the New York Tribune, "The pretense of Douglas and Company that not even Kansas is to be made a slave state by his bill is a joke. Ask any Missourian what he thinks about it. The Kansas Territory is bounded in its entire length by Missouri, with a whole tier of slave counties leaning against it. Won't be a slave state? Gentlemen, don't lie any more." Bloodshed in Kansas. After the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed in 1854, settlers poured into Kansas. Most were peaceful farmers looking for good farmland, but some settlers moved to Kansas either to support or oppose slavery. In the South, towns sent their young men to Kansas, and then in the North, abolitionists raised money to send weapons to anti-slavery settlers. Before long, Kansas had two competing governments in the territory, one for slavery and one against it. The struggle over slavery soon turned violent. On May 21, 1856, pro-slavery settlers and so-called border ruffians from Missouri invaded Lawrence, Kansas, the home of the anti-slavery government. Armed invaders burned a hotel, looted several homes, and tossed the printing press of an abolitionist newspaper into the Kaw River. As the invaders left Lawrence, one of them boasted, "Gentlemen, this is the happiest day of my life." The raid in Lawrence provoked a wave of outrage in the North. People raised money to replace the destroyed presses. More free soilers, as anti-slavery settlers were called, prepared to move to Kansas. Meanwhile, a fiery abolitionist named John Brown plotted his own revenge. Days after the Lawrence raid, Brown and 7 followers, including 4 of Brown's sons and his son-in-law, invaded the pro-slavery town of Pottawatomie, Kansas. There, they dragged 5 men they suspected of supporting slavery from their homes and hacked them to death with swords.